Good afternoon and welcome to the Family Research Council. My name is Irina Grosu and I am the Director of the Center for Human Dignity here at FRC. We are co-hosting this news conference in partnership with the Justice Foundation and Texas Values ahead of the oral arguments tomorrow on the most important case regarding abortion that has come before the Supreme Court since Gonzalez versus Carhart in 2007. We are happy to see Nicole Hutchins here, former FRC intern, and now with Texas Values. The whole women's case versus Hellerstedt is centered on two Texas abortion facility regulations. First, the Texas law proposes the fundamental health and safety standards be applied to abortion facilities, standards that are currently applied to ambulatory surgical centers. These are such as fire and safety code standards. These regulations are designed to safeguard against unsanitary conditions, inferior equipment, and the employment of unsuitable and untrained personnel in abortion centers. Second, it requires that abortionists have admitting privileges to a hospital within 30 miles of the abortion center when something goes wrong with the abortion, as is often the case, and the woman needs to be hospitalized. These laws are common sense. Just yesterday at a Dallas abortion center, another woman had to be transported by ambulance following abortion complications. As federal judge Edith Jones noted in her opinion on this case when it was before the Fifth Circuit, even Planned Parenthood conceded that at least 210 women in Texas annually must be hospitalized after seeking an abortion. Operation Rescue estimates from court records that the number is closer to 1,000 women annually. Nationally, approximately 27,000 women who have experienced complications, and another 3,200 women need to be hospitalized. This was in 2011 alone, and for first trimester abortions alone. We are going to hear from some of these women today. We will also hear about women who have been killed in abortion procedures who no longer can speak for themselves. The need to regulate abortion facilities is necessary to protect women against cut-and-run abortionists and shoddy abortion centers. When such regulations and oversight are not implemented, the consequences are grave. Over the last 6 years, more than 150 abortion providers in at least 30 states and DC have faced criminal charges, investigations, administrative complaints, and/or civil lawsuits related to substandard practices or substandard operations in abortion facilities. The majority of states regulate and inspect restaurants, public pools, veterinary clinics, and hair, nail, and tanning salons. They also regulate ambulatory surgical centers. Abortion facilities must not get a free pass. The abortion industry has a dangerous disregard for women's health and safety. It opposes these standards because these laws threaten its bottom line, which is profit. Abortion is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the U.S. alone. Anyone who truly cares about women's health and safety will support these minimal and necessary standards. We must work to protect women from the substandard and inadequate conditions in which the abortion industry thrives. Without further ado, please give a big hand to Alan Parker, President of the Justice Foundation.
Thank you very much, Irina, and thank you to Family Research Council for allowing us to hold our press conference here today. FRC does great work here in Washington, D.C., and we're honored to be here with them today. We're here today because women die in abortions in America. They die in legal abortions in America. It's not covered much by the media, but women die, they can die, they have died, and without adequate regulation, they will continue to die. And we're very honored to be able to represent over 3,348 women hurt by abortion in an amicus curiae brief in the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to uphold the constitutionality of these regulations that Texas has adopted in order to protect women's health and safety. The Justice Foundation itself was also an amicus party because in 1997, a woman died in San Antonio, Texas, where our headquarters is, from a legal abortion. And she died of a punctured uterus. Punctured uteruses, punctured colons, hemorrhaging, infection, all of these things are known, accepted risks and complications of abortion. And just as Arena said, just yesterday, there was an abortion facility that does meet the ambulatory surgical care standards and yet had to call an ambulance to take the patient, the woman who had an abortion, from the ASC center to the hospital for further care, even above what a ASC center can provide. So these are serious complications. And the abortionists themselves admit that about 210 Texas women per year have to be hospitalized for their abortions. That's 2 a week. Now, the abortion industry says, well, that's very rare, so it doesn't matter. And yet it does matter. If you're the woman that has to be hospitalized, it's of incredible importance to you. And some of the women die from abortions. It wasn't, I have to say, I didn't do much about that in 1997. It wasn't until 2 young female lawyers, Kathleen Cassidy Goodman, who's on our brief at the Supreme Court with us today, who just graduated from law school at that time, said, we need to do something about this. And I said, we'd like to help. What do you want to do? And she said, let's form a Women's Health Protection Task Force. And that's what we did, to enforce abortion regulations, and actually at that time, to get regulations passed. The Texas did not have very strong regulations at that time. We actually had to sue on behalf of 11 women who'd been injured by abortions, to sue the state of Texas in order to get them to enforce the existing regulations. There was one that they be inspected annually, but they would call the abortion facility and say, we're coming out next week, we're going to give you an inspection. Well, I was in the Army. If you know ahead of time, you can get anything ready. You can cover up a lot of unpreparedness that way, and yet that's what they would do. So we sued, and now they're unannounced inspections, so you can find out what really goes on in the procedures. We've also had the great honor of collecting over 4,500 declarations and written testimonies of women hurt by abortion. And I want to bring 2 of those women up to the stage with me at this time. They're going to give their testimonies. They represent 2 of the 3,348 women we represent in this case, but they're also a representative of the 4,500 women who've been hurt by abortion across the country. So at this time, Nona Ellington, would you come up? And Myra Myers also. And if y'all wouldn't mind standing behind those declarations, I want to explain that a little bit to the press and those watching by video or live web stream. This is thousands and thousands of written testimonies of women injured by abortion in America. About 600 to 700 of them are Texas women, or women who had their abortions in Texas and then left, and then the rest are from all over the country. So these women are here as just representatives. These are real women who mostly are living normal lives at home and can't come to Washington, D.C. and do this. They didn't go on to be famous doctors or politicians and some of the other people who have written briefs on the other side. And let me say this, we sympathize greatly with any woman that's had an abortion. Senator Wendy Davis, who was the opponent of this bill, talked afterwards, later when she ran for governor, finally talked about her own abortion and said it was a blackness and a grief that came over her. And we understand that. I, as a representative of women, and these women, we understand that. There is a deep pain. That's why all 8 members of the current Supreme Court say abortion is a difficult and painful decision. And these ladies are going to tell you what that means, some of that pain. So our first witness will be Nona Ellington. Would you come to the test?
Thank you for having me here today. It's an honor. My name is Nona Ellington, and I would like to share my story of how abortion hurt me. I was 15 years old, a victim of date rape, and found out that I was pregnant. I was coerced by friends and family members to go ahead and have an abortion because everybody does it all the time and it's no big deal. I wasn't given any other options. Planned Parenthood told me that I should get an abortion because I was so young and still in high school, and no other options were given to me. As a result of that abortion, I was not able to have children at all. Instead, I had 5 miscarriages. 3 of them were tubal pregnancies, which required emergency surgery, and the last one in 2004 actually ruptured, and so they almost lost me, and I had to have a blood transfusion for them to save my life. And the abortion, years and years and years, affected me physically and emotionally and spiritually. The physical part was really painful. It's not easy to go through a miscarriage process, especially when you know that you're pregnant and you're looking forward to it, and it's just a very difficult thing to go through, but over and over and over again until you just can't have children, period. And so that's been the most difficult part of it for me, emotionally and spiritually. Brought me through a rough path in my life of drug addiction and alcohol abuse as well. I would just like to share that I want women and men to know the truth about abortion, that it hurts women and it hurts families. And I've stood in front of Planned Parenthood, and I've seen ambulances coming in and out with me standing there praying with a strip of life tape across my mouth to represent the silent witness of those that are lost. So I thank you for hearing me out, that abortion hurts women, and these doctors do need to have access to hospitals, and for them to be a surgical center. I mean, they are a surgical center. Abortion is surgery. I never was introduced to the doctor that performed my abortion. All I remember is that he was a man. So it was pretty traumatizing for me, 15 years old, never been to a gynecologist or anything. It was pretty horrific. But the Lord has brought me through that to stand up here and tell you that abortion hurts women and that there are other answers to abortion. Thank you.
Thank you. Just stand over there. Thank you, Nona. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that testimony. You notice one of the things she mentioned, she did not actually mention, but the lady's doctor told her her uterus was scarred from the abortion. And that's a frequent problem when you puncture a uterus or do excessive scraping in the uterus. It can cause scarring. That can cause infertility. And she was never able to have a child. The one she gave up in the abortion was never replaced, even though many of the women feel the need to replace that child and have what psychologists call an atonement child after a while. And the other thing she mentioned was that she never was introduced to the doctor at all. The theory of Roe v. Wade is the decision is supposed to be between a woman and her doctor. In high-volume abortion clinics, which Texas is attempting to regulate, most women, over 90%, never see the doctor until he's performing the procedure. There is no normal doctor-patient relationship. And part of this suit is about the abortion business, not about access to abortion. I'm going to talk later about how much access there still is in Texas, but in a high-volume abortion procedure, they just are interested in high volume of abortions. And that's why they don't usually see the doctor. There's no doctor-patient relationship. So the next witness is going to be Cindy Collins, who is available by telephone. Cindy was supposed to be here today. She lives in New Orleans. Unfortunately, she was not able to arrive on a plane. So if we're hooked up, Cindy, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Alan.
All right. Well, we'll work on getting Cindy hooked up, and we'll go ahead and have Nona right now. Myra Myers from Flower Mound, Texas. Myra.
Today we are here because of the harm to women due to the deception of the devastating, tragic lies of the abortion industry. Nothing wounds you like being responsible for the death of your child. Do you realize today and every day is the daily equivalent of 9/11, when all across America, women and men are deceived and wounded? It has been recognized in the last years, the emotional wounding, the grief, even depression, that the loss of a child and being responsible for the loss brings. Today we are here to testify to the fact that abortion harms you often physically in numerous ways. When I went to Planned Parenthood in January 1973, right after the Supreme Court ruling, that clerk did say, if you have a problem with it afterwards, we have counseling. I wondered, why should I have any problem? Abortion was illegal. There shouldn't be any problem, I thought. Lying on the abortionist table, I failed to realize I had been in this position 5 times previously as I birthed my children as a married woman. I also failed to realize that the dangerous abortion procedure was damaging my uterus and would result in a hysterectomy shortly afterwards. This produced my ovaries to fail, ovarian failure, estrogen deprivation, and depression. You never think about the consequences because you have not been told there are any consequences to abortion. The truth needs to be known because today and every day, the lies of the abortion industry are deceiving women, men, families, and our nation. Abortion is destroying our country from within. And we need to protect women from the deception and the wounding and damage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will make these affidavits available for perusal by any members of the press that would like to do that. Myra and Nona are available afterwards for questions too. And we're going to have a question and answer session at the end also. So ladies, thank you all. If you would, well, I'll just wait and I'll take my seat with you. Cindy, do we have Cindy by phone? No, okay. I'm sorry that we're unable to get Cindy by phone. Like I say, she was unable to get the plane and so unable to be with us today. But what you've learned and what I've learned representing these women is that abortion does have terrible consequences. I said that I was going to talk about this case. It's being pitched as a access to abortion case by the other side. And they emphasize on the closing, but I want to emphasize something that in the law that the other side is not emphasizing, which is kind of how they mislead women. I believe they're misleading the press and America. They say they're emphasizing the clinics that are closing, and some have, but the evidence shows not all of them closed because of the law itself. But the law only applies if you do more than 50 abortions a year. If you're a high-volume abortion provider, then the risk of you puncturing a uterus goes up the more abortions you do. And so the risk of a particular complication arising in a particular facility goes up as the volume goes up. That's just undeniable logic. Nobody would really dispute that. But Texas still allows any doctor in the state to perform an abortion if they do less than 50, which is kind of the theory of Roe v. Wade. A woman would go to a regular doctor, her doctor, and talk about the question. Instead, they go to a high-volume procedure where they're not told the consequences of abortion or explained any alternatives. And instead, they get, in fact, this was one of the words of the abortionist in one of the early regulation cases we were involved in. A doctor who did abortions in his own office said the facilities were like cattle calls and women were treated like cattle. And the women's testimonies say that. Same thing in our brief quotes some of the women saying that. It's like a cattle call. But Texas is trying to avoid that. And there are 49,000 doctors in Texas who each could perform 50 abortions a year. That's almost 2.5 million abortions that can still be performed in Texas under this law. And many of those are in the Valley and El Paso. There are doctors in every city in Texas, particularly any larger city, not every rural community, but the Valley and El Paso have doctors. In fact, if you wanted to limit it just to obstetricians and gynecologists, ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, who has filed a brief in the case and in many abortion cases saying abortion is a fundamental right, women need it to have good access to care, they have 2,549 members of ACOG in Texas who could each do 50 abortions a year. That would be 127,450 abortions. And last year, for which there's data, 2013, only 63,000 abortions were performed. So ACOG alone, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, to do every abortion that Texas women need. We have a declining number of abortions in Texas because many women are learning about the harm of abortion to themselves. We cited in our brief, and I can't remember now if it's Kourtney or Khloe Kardashian, kept her baby because she went on the website and read so many testimonies of women who felt guilty about their abortions that she kept her baby. And it's cited in the briefing. I don't quite keep up with the Kardashians. I apologize. Without further ado then, ladies, if you would take your seat, I'll introduce our next witness. Let's thank them again. Thank you very, very much. Is Cindy available? Okay. We do have Cindy Collins on the line. So Cindy.
I'm on the line now.
All right,
Can you hear
go.
me?
Yes, go ahead, Cindy, if you'll tell us about your abortion.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And just so important for the voices of women hurt by abortion to be heard. So thank you. I was 19 years old and a college student when I visited a Planned Parenthood facility in Pennsylvania, and it was in January of 1973. And I was told that I could go to Washington, D.C., so I just find it very striking that here now, 43 years later, my voice is being heard to be told, for everybody to hear how abortion not only hurt me, but has hurt millions of women. And as a college student, when I sat there, I was told, as we've been heard before, that my baby was a blob of tissue, that it was not a living human being. And I went by that counsel, went to Washington, D.C., and I was herded into a room with approximately 40 other women, and it was very impersonal. I was given a cup and a number, and I've counseled many women since that time, and that's what I still hear from them, that the women are given a cup and a number. And then I was taken into a room, and after being given little counsel, and the abortionist came in. I had not seen him before, never saw him again. There was no doctor-patient relationship at all, and the procedure took probably about 7 to 10 minutes, and it was the worst pain that I've ever gone through in my life. And what happened with me is I immediately started to hemorrhage and went and was placed in another room, and I remember being told that that's the room that women who are having problems, that's where they're put, and the room was full. So as I was able to stop bleeding enough, and there was no care, there was no, doctor coming in and checking on me at all, I left. And within a couple of weeks, I left college, or ended my relationship with my boyfriend. And within the end of that semester, I ended up not returning to college. And has been heard before, went into deep depression, regret, and just started having a lot of severe emotional problems that really led me into promiscuity, and ended up becoming pregnant again and having multiple abortions. And what I want to say is that within one of those abortions, I did hemorrhage, and parts of the baby were left inside of me. And that was a menstrual regulation abortion. And what had happened was the abortionist could see that I was not doing well, and instead of providing care, had slapped me on the side of the leg and told me to get up and get out. And so I ended up having to go to the hospital emergency room and having the remains of my baby removed. And it's by the grace of God that I'm alive. I can tell you with what had happened with that. So since that time, I've gone through a lot of counseling and healing from the trauma of abortion, as you heard Nona and Myra speak about, but also the physical damage. I ended up spending 5 months in bed with my son John when I was pregnant with him, and I had miscarried prior to him because of the damage done by abortion. And then I stayed in bed for 7 months with my twin daughters, Rachel, almost losing them and hemorrhaging in both of those pregnancies. Since that time, I've committed my life to helping other women and sharing my story so that women will know the truth about abortion, that it is a lie, and that it's the very most vulnerable time of their life. They need help. They don't need abortion. These are common sense standards that just show the care and the compassion, for women, and the medical profession should be applauding these standards. And I really don't understand how those groups that say that they're for women don't understand how these can help women. And so, just in my closing, I want to thank Family Research Council and Alan Parker for allowing us to be a voice, because I know that there are millions others like me, like Nona, and like Myra that need help, and also for this generation to come to know that abortion is a lie and that abortion hurts women. So thank you, Alan, and thank you for allowing me to speak and for my voice to be heard.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. So the abortion industry does not tell women that 10 patients a week have to go to an emergency room after abortions in Texas. They don't tell them that 210 women a year have to be hospitalized for abortion. They tell them, don't worry, it's quick, easy, 10 minutes, you'll be out of here. And that's not what happens in far too many cases. Sadly, in Cindy's case, for example, she did not mention, I don't think that, but I know from her testimony on other occasions that she even attempted suicide after a while. Some of those women are successful. That does not usually go down as a complication of abortion because it happens a long time after the abortion, or maybe 5 days after the abortion, but it's just goes down as a suicide. Other women die in abortion clinic today, and they can't be here to speak for themselves, but we're very honored to have here today to speak on behalf of a woman who died in Philadelphia in Kermit Gosnell's clinic. And a lawyer, Jonathan Saenz of Texas Values, filed a brief at the Supreme Court on behalf of Jennifer Brown, who's also here, who produced the Gosnell movie, which is very closely connected to the Texas case. Jonathan Saenz, thank you. Please welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Jonathan Saenz. I'm a lawyer. I'm also the president of Texas Values. Texas Values is the largest nonprofit organization in the state of Texas that works on the issues of faith, family, and freedom. We are honored to be hosted here today by Family Research Council. We're so thankful for the trend-setting work that Tony Perkins and the entire staff here at Family Research Council are involved in and continue to be involved in. And we look forward to continuing our partnership with the work that we're doing, because obviously so often we see the issues that happen in Texas impact the rest of the country. The main reason we're here today is because Texas Values has filed a brief with the U.S. Supreme Court on the issue of HB2, the law that's being challenged by abortion providers at the U.S. Supreme Court, where oral arguments will be heard tomorrow in front of the court. We are so excited and thankful, too, that our Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is so strong and supportive of this law, and that our Texas Solicitor General, Scott Keller, will be arguing this case before the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow on behalf of the state of Texas and on behalf of the health and safety of women. We're also thankful that our governor, Greg Abbott, who was Attorney General at the time when this law was making its way through the process and was signed and was first being challenged, his leadership, the leadership of Governor Greg Abbott, was also such a strong part of this law continuing to exist and be defended in our courts at all different levels in federal court. I also have to mention one other governor, Rick Perry, who was governor at the time of the state of Texas when this law was signed by Governor Perry and was approved by bipartisan support. You might remember that the state capitol was almost shut down essentially because of so many people that wanted to prevent women from having health and safety standards that are provided and ensured by HB2. Because of so much of this issue impacting the state of Texas and so many people having concern, our organization oftentimes files briefs at the U.S. Supreme Court to support our state laws and to support our state leaders on this issue. The author of the bill, being a House bill, was State Representative Jody Laubenberg. You heard a lot of talk during the debate over HB2 about the woman that was going against the law, Wendy Davis, but you never heard a lot about the woman that actually was behind supporting the law and making sure that it got passed. And that was State Representative Jody Laubenberg, who did a fantastic job of defending that law. Representative Laubenberg, along with over 100 other state legislators, have joined a brief as well before the U.S. Supreme Court supporting Texas's HB2 law. Texas Values filed and submitted a brief before the U.S. Supreme Court, not only on behalf of the values that we stand for, faith, family, and freedom, but also on behalf of the 3801 Lancaster Film Project, which the producer is Jen Brown of this documentary, this award-winning film that you're going to hear more about, that talks about in detail the awful things that were happening in Kermit Gosnell's clinic in Pennsylvania. And as a matter of fact, it's the awful things that were happening in that clinic which ended up having the abortionist Kermit Gosnell in jail for life that was the motivation for Texas legislators to stand up for women and ensure that health and safety standards would exist in our state law, so that what happened to women in Kermit Gosnell's clinic at 3801 Lancaster would never happen to another woman in Texas and hopefully throughout the country. The case, Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt, is a very important case. We know that what happens in Texas, we see oftentimes other states will want to follow suit, and we hope that they do. We hope that the health and safety that women should be guaranteed is not just limited to the state of Texas. You heard a little bit in our former speaker about what House Bill 2 does and what's being challenged. The portion of the law that's being challenged are common sense health and safety standards for women. They are about making sure that abortion clinics have to follow ambulatory surgical center regulations. It's also about making sure that abortion doctors have admitting privileges within 30 miles of an abortion facility and a hospital. Let me be very clear. There is nothing in the provisions of HB 2 that are being challenged that force an abortion clinic to close. If for some reason you hear an abortion clinic provider or administrator say that they're closing their clinic because of these provisions of HB 2, that is a decision they are making because they refuse to implement the common sense health and safety standards that ambulatory surgical centers have across the country. As a matter of fact, there are over 450 ambulatory surgical centers already in the state of Texas. I think it's very important to note that Planned Parenthood has agreed, or they're going along with the law. They're following law. As a matter of fact, they have one of the largest abortion clinics in the country, very close to the area where I grew up in Houston, Texas. So the notion that this law forces abortion clinics to close is not true. If you see an abortion clinic close and they cite this law, it's because they're putting their economic interest ahead of the health and safety of women, and that is shameful. We firmly believe that women should not be treated as second-class citizens when it comes to common sense health and safety standards for abortion clinics. And that's why we're here supporting HB 2 and the law that's before the U.S. Supreme Court on this issue. It's also important to note, Texas is a big state. But even though that's the case, over 90% of our state population live within 150 miles of an abortion clinic. The access that women have to an abortion clinic in the state of Texas is very clear, that access is there and it continues. And so that's something you'll hear talked about a lot in this issue and being mischaracterized simply because of the geographic nature of the state of Texas. The large centers of the San Antonio area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Houston area comprise, in other parts of the state, 90% of our population where women are within 150 miles of an abortion clinic. I have, for our guests and members of the press, a copy of our brief that we filed with the U.S. Supreme Court. I encourage you to take a look at it. And what you'll find in there is some of the major portions of the grand jury report from the Kermit Gosnell trial. The trial was not very well covered, as I understand it, and you'll hear more about it in the film. But in our brief, we made sure that it took center stage, and rightly so. Because what you find in this grand jury report that talks about some of the awful things that Kermit Gosnell did at his abortion clinic, the grand jury report specifically recommended that states require all abortions to be performed in ambulatory surgical centers. And I quote, "Abortion clinics should be explicitly regulated as ambulatory surgical facilities so that they are inspected annually and held to the same standards of all other outpatient procedure centers." The grand jury also found that the abhorrent conditions and practices in Gosnell's clinics are directly attributable to the Pennsylvania Health Department's refusal to treat abortion clinics as ambulatory surgical facilities. These and other findings in this grand jury report provide ample justification for the HB 2 Texas law that's being challenged before the U.S. Supreme Court. These are folks that are not a member of the legislative process in Pennsylvania. This is from the grand jury report. Their recommendations, essentially, of what are common sense health and safety standards and what should be required so that women never have the awful experiences that they had in Kermit Gosnell's clinic. Let me also be clear. This court case about HB 2, the Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt, is not challenging Roe versus Wade. It is not an attempt to overturn Roe versus Wade. And it's not required for that to happen in order for the U.S. Supreme Court to rule in favor of the HB2 law. As a matter of fact, there are many other states that have similar provisions in state law requirements, just like the one in the state of Texas under HB2. What you'll also find is that the Gosnell case is overwhelming proof that Texas's HB2 requirements for common sense safety standards are critically necessary for women. The documentary 3801 Lancaster that we're going to show a few clips from in just a minute is an eye-opening experience for viewers to see the dangers of not having basic health and safety standards at abortion clinics. We urge the U.S. Supreme Court to look at the information in this brief, to look at the information presented in this award-winning documentary film, 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy. This outstanding evidence shows that HB2 should be upheld. We encourage every American, for that matter, to watch this film, and we anticipate the day that the atrocities that happened at Gosnell Clinic will never happen again. And I just want to direct your attention to two particular pages in our brief. On the appendix, page 51A, when you get a copy of it, you'll see is a picture of baby boy A. And this is what was noted in the grand jury report. Kermit Gosnell simply noted that the baby's boy's size by joking, as he often did after delivering a large baby. He said, according to the grand jury report, Kermit Gosnell said, "This baby is big enough to walk around with me or walk me to the bus stop." That is a comment he made about a baby that was found in his clinic when it was finally investigated. Another photograph that we have in our appendix of our amicus brief is named Baby Boy B. And when you take a closer look at the photo, you'll see there's a slit in the back of his neck. This was about an abortion, commonly called partial birth abortion, a procedure that was happening after the baby is partially born. In our brief, we talk about this, the callous killing of babies outside the womb, the routinely performed third trimester abortions, the death of at least 2 patients, and the grievous health risk inflicted on countless women by Gosnell and unlicensed staff are not the only shocking things that the grand jury report found. What surprised them is the official neglect that allowed these crimes and conditions to persist for years in this facility. The medical examiner noted and concluded that 2 of them, and one was a 28-week fetus, as it's called in our brief, a male, baby boy B, had a surgical incision on the back of the neck, which penetrated the first and second vertebrae. And that baby boy did not make it out of Gosnell's clinic alive. As I move off from the podium here, you're going to see 2 film clips, and after that, we're going to have Jen Brown, the director of 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy, is going to come up and talk about the film that highlights what happened in Gosnell's clinic and what should never happen again, and is the reason why the Supreme Court should uphold HB2. You'll see 2 clips. One is a very important part of the film, and the other one is the trailer of the film that you can access at 3801lancaster.com.
December 2009. Gosnell submits an application to become a member of the National Abortion Federation, a professional association of 400 abortion providers nationwide. The NAF evaluator goes to Gosnell's clinic and notes that records are not properly kept, risks are not explained, patients are not monitored, equipment is not available, and anesthesia is misused. It is the worst abortion clinic the evaluator has ever inspected, and NAF rejects Gosnell's application. However, they do not report the clinic's conditions to any oversight agencies. Grand Jury Report, page 13.
Why the heck didn't somebody say, I'm going to go to the cops? Why the heck didn't somebody say, I'm going to take this to the DA's office or the city inspector's office? Why did they just let it fester and fester and fester? There was a whole system failure and people have died.
This next story comes with a strong word of caution. The details are gruesome. You won't want young children to watch.
I don't know where he went wrong.
He's somebody who had an uncanny ability to almost enchant people.
You have to be crazy in order to do these things to babies.
This case is almost unprecedented.
Last February, district attorneys, detectives, and other law enforcement agents served a search warrant on the medical office of Dr. Kermit Gosnell.
I was not prepared to see what I saw in that clinic.
Blood-stained walls, blood-stained beds.
This place was a pest hole. You wouldn't take your dog or your cat there.
We open up the cabinet and we see 5 jars of feet. This was different than any job we've ever handled.
I'm just so shocked at all the things that they're saying about him.
Kermit Gosnell remains a mystery.
He was happy, he always had a joke, friendly, very kind, giving.
What happened to him that changed him from a legitimate doctor in West Philadelphia to the symbol of evil?
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
Kermit Gosnell. I very strongly believe in my innocence, and there are many people who believe that.
Over a period of 2 decades, government health and licensing officials were repeatedly confronted with evidence about Gosnell and repeatedly chose to do nothing.
They didn't subpoena people. They didn't subpoena records. They didn't ask to go into Gosnell's clinic.
They just let it fester and fester and fester, and people have died. There was no reason they should not have been in that clinic shutting it down.
The story just doesn't make sense. People are coming to you for 40 years. How could you be this terrible person?
I went to him because as a child I was taught doctors were people that you could trust. You can't even trust them anymore.
We've allowed a man to butcher babies, butcher women, and nobody did a damn thing about it.
George Bernard Shaw said that practical man changes to live within his society. Impractical man has the priority of changing society to meet its own needs. Therefore, progress can only be accomplished by impractical man.
Would you describe yourself as an impractical man?
No question. No question.
Good afternoon. My name is Jen Brown. I live in Austin, Texas, and as Jonathan was telling you, I'm the producer of the documentary film 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy, which chronicles the crimes committed by Dr. Kermit Gosnell and the state of Pennsylvania's failure to protect women and babies. While my film team and I are proud that people all across the country are seeing our film, we're most excited by the open and respectful conversations happening at our theatrical screenings between people on both sides of this debate. Our goal with 3801 Lancaster is to explore the question of how the Gosnell tragedy was allowed to happen and what can be done to ensure that it never happens again. Spending time with Gosnell's former patients and those in the film who identify as pro-choice made it clear that most Americans, regardless of whether they are pro-life or pro-choice, believe that common sense abortion clinic regulations are critical for protecting women. The Gosnell case has illustrated for our country in an unforgettable way the horror of what happens when abortion is allowed to go unregulated. Texans must lead the country in saying we will not let this happen again on our watch. Gosnell's case and the stories told in my documentary reveal what can happen when health and safety laws like HB2 do not exist or are not enforced. As a Texas woman, I am proud to stand here today in support of the common sense health and safety regulations required by law under HB2. Laws like HB2 affect real people. I spoke to many women while I was making my documentary who the state of Pennsylvania failed to protect. These women have deep emotional and physical scars that they will carry forever. Because laws like HB2 were left unenforced, Gosnell made millions preying on women in desperate situations. It is for these women and the thousands whose stories remain untold that I support HB2. I am grateful that 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy, is a small part of this important conversation, and I sincerely hope that the justices will take time to view the film and ultimately uphold HB2 to protect women and children in Texas and across the country from atrocities like what happened in Gosnell's clinic. More information about 3801 Lancaster is available online at 3801lancaster.com. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Hudgens, and I'm a policy analyst at Texas Values, and it's an honor to be back at FRC. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more about our brief, to go to txvalues.org. That's txvalues.org. Today, I stand on behalf of millennial women and all women in Texas who firmly believe that the basic health care standards in HB2 are not only reasonable, but are critical for protecting the lives of the vulnerable. Texas women deserve to be protected, especially from terrifying incidents such as what was seen in Kermit Gosnell's clinic. And no woman deserves a horrifying and preventable death like the one of Karnamaya Mangar. When Kermit Gosnell exercised any real care with dangerous sedatives, it was only with white women from the suburbs because, in his words, and I quote, "It was the way of the world." But Karnamaya was not one of those privileged patients. She was a 41-year-old refugee who had recently come to the United States from a resettlement camp in Nepal. And when she arrived at the clinic, Gosnell, as usual, was not there. Office workers had her sign various forms that she couldn't read or understand, and then they began doping her up. She received repeated, unmonitored, and unrecorded dangerous sedatives, Demerol. And it's a sedative that's seldom used in recent years because it's dangerous, but Gosnell used it because it was cheap. After several hours, Karnamaya stopped breathing. When employees finally noticed, Gosnell was called in and briefly attempted to give CPR, but he couldn't use the defibrillator because it was broken. Finally, after further crucial delay, paramedics arrived, but it was believed that Karnamaya was already brain dead. The paramedics were able to generate a weak pulse. But because of the cluttered hallways and the padlocked emergency door, it took them over 20 minutes just to find a way to get her out of the building. And they had to carry her out on a stretcher because the hallways were too narrow for a gurney. Doctors at the hospital managed to get her heart to beat, but they never knew what they were trying to treat because Gosnell and his staff lied about how much anesthesia she was given, as well as who gave it to her. At that point, there was no way to restore brain activity. Life support was removed. And the next day, Karnamaya Mangar died. Had Gosnell applied for admitting privileges, he would have been carefully monitored, and Karnamaya would be alive today. Had the hallways been wide enough, and if the paramedics would not have lost precious time trying to get her out, Karnamaya would be alive today. Had Gosnell's clinic had the same safety standards that are required in Texas's HB2 law, Karnamaya would be alive today. The question before the Supreme Court tomorrow is not just about basic health care. It is a question of whether or not a Texas woman will be alive today. And we encourage you to read more about this at txvalues.org and to monitor this case, and we urge the Supreme Court to protect our Texas women. Thank you.
If all the speakers will make their way to the stage, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. We have a microphone that can move around to make sure you pick up your answers or your question. Please wait to ask question till you have that. Does anyone have a question? Is there anybody that would like to ask a question of any member? Yes, go ahead. If you'll direct it to me, then yes.
As far as
wait, use the microphone in your hand. Thanks.
As far as the movie, you say that it's going to be a November 10th that is going to be shown. Any reason, isn't the election on the 8th? Any reason that that wouldn't be done before the election so people could see the candidates that are in favor of abortion and those that aren't?
Great question. It actually came out on the film actually came out on November 10th of 2015, so it's already out, and it's in theaters right now, so you can check it out online. And to find out where it's playing, it's a limited release. You can go to our website, 3801lancaster.com.
And along those lines, let me just reiterate, that was about 2012 when it got exposure in the media, starting in Philadelphia area. It was ignored for a long time by many national media outlets, and then it did get some national media attention, but it was very instrumental in the 2013 legislative effort of Texas to pass this law. It was the grand jury worried about the death of a woman who recommended that these type of standards be enacted. The Texas legislature only meets every 2 years, thank God, and so they met in January of 2013 and passed this. And then, because of a filibuster, it had to be gone to a special session and redone it. In the Texas legislature, 600 to 700 of these declarations and testimonies of women hurt by abortion were given to the legislature. They had Texas evidence, and many of the women of Operation Outcry spoke about the pain of their abortion to the Texas legislature. So anyone who even supports abortion can support this law. Some of the media have said, well, you know, why are y'all doing this? We do not want women to die in abortions. That's the basic motivation, and other injuries as well. Yes.
And along those same lines, I think it's important for people to know, even though it is a Texas case, you've had folks from all across the country that are supporting the law from the state of Texas. Over 30 briefs were filed in support of Texas's law, not just from within the state, but many other states. Wisconsin has filed a brief. You've got the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention. You've got National Right to Life. You've got the Faculty for Life that have filed a brief. National Association of Pro-Life Nurses. National Association of Catholic Nurses. Many national organizations and statewide organizations across the country that have filed briefs in support of the state law because they care about women.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Wait till you have the microphone. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Penny Starr with CNS News. It's not really a question, it's logistics. These affidavits and declarations, are these like individual women telling their stories in their own words, or is it more of a form, and are they available online?
Absolutely, the women tell the story in their own words. There is a form that asks 7 questions so that they're legally admissible. When and where did your abortion occur? And they are going to be available afterwards for this press conference. Anyone can look at them. The only editing that has been done, we use the woman's name, full name, or first name or initial only, according to her instructions, if she wants to protect her confidentiality, and then we redact her personally identifiable contact information. So, but their story is exactly there. Yes, ma'am.
Are they available online, or is it just here?
No, they're really not available online. There are a few stories on our website, operationoutcry.org. And let me say, if you're watching this and you've had an abortion and you want the courts and legislatures to know about the pain that abortion caused you, you can go to operationoutcry.org and fill out one of these legally admissible testimony forms, and then ask us or instruct us how to use your name to protect your identity. Some women are willing to be as brave as Nona and Myra and let their full identities be known. Others want to keep it from family or friends or whatever. Many decades in silence, many women go. Even women on the other side who filed briefs often don't tell family members about their abortion.
And you said that these have been submitted to the Supreme Court.
Yes, actually, parts of them on numerous occasions. The Supreme Court is somewhat familiar with these. They were actually in the North Dakota case, which the Supreme Court considered a few weeks ago. And many states and legislatures have looked at these. About 2,000 were given to South Dakota. There's another great government task force report called the South Dakota Task Force Report on Abortion. It's the first government study in 30 years that actually studied the reality of abortion rather than the Roe v. Wade utopian dream of between a woman and her private doctor, she's going to make the decision. And they found that abortion in practice, women don't see the doctor, are not given the full facts and information, and suffer serious consequences, both physically and emotionally. And Justice Kennedy in Gonzalez v. Carhart cited two of these women, or cited the Justice Foundation brief, which had about 180 women's testimony at that time. And he said, it's unexceptionable to conclude some women come to regret aborting the infant life they once created and sustained. Severe depression and loss of esteem can follow. And I have to defend, the New York Times, without any source, said some people think that's uninformed paternalism. That is not. That is concern for women's health and safety, and we hope to get Justice Sotomayor and Kagan's vote in this case also, because Justice Sotomayor was a prosecutor and knows how evil human beings can be. Even in an industry, and then we're not saying that about every abortionist, they're not all Gosnells, but without adequate regulation, human nature can cause great injury to other human beings. Thank you. Other questions? And if you are with the news media, if you'd state your source.
Hi, I'm Linda Royal. I'm with stream.org. And my question for you is this. I've had the question from many of our readers sent to my email, my blog. What are the national repercussions if we do not get a favorable decision? What do you anticipate those repercussions might be? And we're all concerned, of course, because of the absence and seat number 2, Justice Scalia.
Yes. Let me talk legally first then. Texas can win even with a 4-4 tie because the decision below by the Fifth Circuit, which 3 judges considered this constitutional and upheld it. And the Fifth Circuit just upheld Louisiana's regulation, which is similar. So the Fifth Circuit has considered this. So Texas can win even with a 4-4 tie, though that would not have a binding national precedence. It would protect the Texas law. A 4-4 tie has no decision. But as I said, we're very hopeful that we're going to get at least Justice Sotomayor and Kagan and the traditional conservatives, so perhaps a 5-3 vote in our favor. And that would be good. Then you could protect the safety of women all over the country. If these laws are struck down, and if we do not repent as a nation for the shedding of innocent blood, I tremble for my country as to what would happen to my country. But this case is not dependent upon Roe v. Wade or anything else being overturned. It can be upheld under this Roe, but if the courts want to consider it, if the Attorney General was asked a question like, should we reevaluate it, I would expect the Attorney General of Texas to say that should be the right of the states and of the people of the United States to make those decisions for themselves. This case is not about ending abortion. It's about regulating abortion, but you never know what kind of questions might come up in an argument or what the judges are thinking about. Judge.
I think the state of Texas and its leaders have made it very clear that their commitment to Texas women and any women that come into our state from other parts of the country is very strong and consistent. And regardless of what decision the Supreme Court makes, you will continue to see our Texas leaders find a way to protect their health and safety. They've already been doing that as far as some of the efforts they've been involved in funding efforts for women's health throughout the state of Texas with our own tax dollars. They continue to do things to show the value of ambulatory surgical centers. And so it's very clear that our state leaders have a long-term commitment, and it's not going to go away. It will be troubling, and I think it'll call into question some of the legitimacy of the U.S. Supreme Court and the type of decisions they're making if we see them continue to be hostile to certain common sense basic health and safety standards like this, which were widely protected and supported across the state of Texas. There was bipartisan support on this type of issue, and it was something that worked its way through the court quite extensively. And so you'll hear some of those arguments tomorrow are about some concerns of whether or not these issues have already been settled before they even got to this point. And so if we're allowing the pro-abortion side, the folks that don't want these health and safety standards, giving them too many chances to clog up the court system on an issue that's already really been settled. But I think you'll see people continue to find a way in the state of Texas and other states to try to address these real health and safety standards and concerns. Because when women are dying, we heard a report just this week about an ambulance showing up at a clinic in Dallas. We heard about the statistics, 10 women a week and so on, that the problem is not going to go away. And I think that the state of Texas will continue to find ways to have a solution to protecting the health and safety of their women. And so, and you asked a question about the film. I forgot to mention this for Jen. There is a current screening coming up for folks that are watching in the state of Texas, since we are talking about Texas. On March 23rd, 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy is being screened in Dallas and in Houston on March 23rd.
Yes. No, but you have to come over here to say it.
I'm not sure if it's been mentioned, but all of these declarations say this is the largest known body in the world of direct sworn testimony from women injured by abortion. So this is just like a portion, right? Only a portion of the testimonies collected.
Thank you. There's a question over here.
Hi, my name's Kelsey Harkness. I'm a reporter with the Daily Signal. I apologize, I walked in late, so I missed one of your stories, but I have a question for the very brave women who are willing to share their stories. Do you receive any public backlash when you tell your story, or do you see it online? Do you ever receive anything like that?
And you need to come over here to answer.
Right. Just sometimes comments that are put according to what we submit, and you know, they just they're still in denial. They're still under deception. They have not allowed themselves to really think about the truth, because if you think about it, it is going to overwhelm you emotionally. And there is no way to deal with that without crying out to God as I did, "Oh God, I have murdered." The weight of grief, guilt lifted, and his peace was greater. Thank you.
There's a question up here. You need to wait for the microphone. I'm sorry. You should know the rules. This is Pierre Bynum.
Alan, thanks to all of you for your labors and this desperately needed fight. And Alan, what can the average Christian American do now to impact these hearings tomorrow and the decision that will come out?
Well, the question was, what can the average Christian American do? And the answer is pray. We're commanded in Scripture to pray for those in authority. 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 8 says to pray, first of all, for those in authority and for kings. And we don't have a king, but we have 3 equal branches of government. We need to pray for them. People forget to pray for the Supreme Court sometimes. They pray for the president. They pray for Congress. Pray regularly for the Supreme Court. We're praying for justice for the Supreme Court, for eyes to be opened, for the truth to be overwhelming victor in every court. And I think all of us can agree to pray those prayers, and we leave God up to decide sometimes what the result is. But we want truth. We want justice. We want open eyes and compassionate hearts. And these are difficult decisions sometimes for the judge to make. There's tremendous pressure on them, and they have great impact. So we want to all continually pray for each member of the Supreme Court because we love them as Christians, and we want to encourage everyone to pray for them as those in authority.
The one thing I would say as far as what people can do, the average American, the average person that has concern, read the briefs and share them with people. There is some incredible information and documentation in these briefs that I don't think you'll find anywhere else. And I think oftentimes on this type of issue, you will have people say, "Oh, I don't believe it," or, "I don't think that that's true. That's a rumor. I'm not, These are legal briefs that have been filed before the U.S. Supreme Court. This information has been verified. It's been investigated. It is true. And some of it, so much of it that you'll see, it is not about an issue, like was said, about being pro-life or pro-choice. It is fact. The information in the grand jury Gosnell report is shocking. It's eye-opening, but it is true. It happened. And you've got to see it. You got to confront it to believe it. Share it with people, too, so they can see it. When you see the photographs, even though they're disturbing, of the bodies and the babies and the human waste, all those things, people want to act like they don't exist. It happened. It's in there. Share that information with people so they can come to terms with the fact that sometimes people do these horrible things, but that does not mean that as a country and as Americans in other ways that we cannot hold them accountable, but also hopefully reach a place to where we learn from it and it never happens again.
I would also add to this that Kermit Gosnell was not an outlier. There are other Gosnells right now who are still practicing as abortionists. For example, Carpin in Texas, who actually twists off the heads of babies and was cleared of any wrongdoing. He is still practicing. Other ones, such as here in Germantown, we have another abortionist. And the fact that there are 27,000 complications per year and 31 or 3,200 that require hospitalization means that there's things going on in these facilities that we don't know about, and we need to know about what's going on if we care about women. And so your takeaway from this should be why should we not regulate the abortion industry the way that every other industry needs to be regulated? Women's health is at stake in this, and if we care for women, we need to make sure that these abortionists and the staff there and the sanitation conditions in these facilities meet the standards, just minimal, basic standards. And so I think that Alan made a good point, saying that this is not about ending abortion, it's about regulating the abortion industry, and they should not get a free pass, as I said earlier.
And just to follow up, if people want to read some of those briefs, they're available on the SCOTUS blog. That stands for Supreme Court of the United States, spelled out SCOTUS, SCOTUS, I guess, .org or blog, SCOTUS blog. You can find it.
We've got a list of all of them too at txvalues.org.
txvalues.org has a list. And as a lawyer to non-lawyers, read the table of contents. That will tell you what it's really about. And lawyers put great effort into making sure their table of contents is a good summary of their argument, because sometimes that's maybe all your brief gets. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
I would just like to echo Mr. Bynum's appreciation of you guys. Thank you for all you're doing. Arena already kind of answered this. I watch a lot of YouTube, and there's this one young lady who expressed her disdain with the further regulations on abortion clinics, even making fun of the fact that they want laws focusing on the width of the hallways, which I thought was ironic since, in Gosnell's case, the woman died because of that. So my question is how do we respond to that and say this isn't just something, we're not just focusing on the extreme of the Gosnell case, but this is, like Arena said, not an exception. This is actually happening all over the place. I mean, but it's just not being broadcast. They think, when I talked to this one young lady, she said, oh, those are just extremes. That doesn't happen every day. You can't use that as an example. So what would you guys say to that?
Well, I'll tell you, the legislative process is not simply a collection of people's whims and opinions throughout the day. It is a very serious, well thought out process. And so it's important when we make these type of decisions that we have good and accurate information in order to make these type of decisions. And so while we respect the First Amendment and for people to have their viewpoints on these type of issues, when we actually are in the business of reviewing cases and putting laws into place, I think it's important for people to be reminded of how deliberate and how in-depth the legislative process is that leads them to a point of developing these type of laws. In the state of Texas, as a matter of fact, one of the strongest witnesses on this issue was an emergency room doctor, State Senator Donna Campbell, who was a part of supporting this issue on the Texas Senate floor, and some of the experiences that she had were used throughout the process, so you can have that type of high quality level of information. Unfortunately, some people will never believe until they experience it themselves. That is tragic. But for the most part, if we have these things in place that are based on sound science, they're based on true experience and experts, as they are in Texas through HB2, you have common sense policy that people can rely on, so it doesn't happen again. Even if women like this don't agree with it, it'll be there to protect her.
And I want to salute, you're a young person who asked the question, I want to salute you, and I want to salute Jen Brown particularly, who went out and made the documentary herself. And there is a problem of, because this is such a highly charged political issue, then many in the media, I believe, are ideologically committed and are afraid that if any bad news about the industry comes out, it will hurt the fundamental right of access to it. So there's a bit of a news blackout in some of the news media that might cover people injured by any other industry in America. And we don't normally listen to an industry that says, well, for example, high schools were required in Texas to have a defibrillator. Well, it's pretty rare for an athlete to die from a heart attack as a young person. But we decided it was worth the money to put defibrillators everywhere because some may die and that may save them. That's kind of the issue in this case. Okay, not every woman is going to have a punctured uterus, but it is a known risk. The more abortions you do, the more you will puncture women's uteruses. That's why the ambulances come and pick them up and take them to the hospital. But you don't hear that. And even if you believe in informed consent, women ought to do that. But I'm urging you and other young people to do the documentaries and the films, copy the evidence, and distribute it. Get it out there. Help us. We need help in the media. And I appreciate the media that do cover it very much.
I will also add that the National Abortion Federation back in 2000 came out with guidelines saying that abortionists should have admitting privileges within 20 minutes of the abortion center. That was back in 2000. Even the abortion industry is had put forth guidelines that now they're kind of backtracking. And so we need to really push the abortion industry and say, if you really care for women's health, why are you not standing by these very basic necessary measures? And we need to call them out on that.
Well, thank you, Irina, for having us here today. Thank you to FRC. Thank you to the media that's been here today. We understand how difficult your job can be sometimes, covering complex and difficult issues in a short time sometimes. So thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for everyone who watched by live web stream today or who happened to see this on video later. Thank you, Irina. Thank you. Thank you very much. And our witnesses are